Okay, so we are now going into the reading comprehension section of Paper 1 English A, still on 2016. One of the first things you're going to see is a poem. And many times we look at the poems and we think they're so difficult to understand, but we have to remember that poetry is written to express the emotions of the writer, and in many ways they do not always use plain language. They find creative ways to help the reader to feel or better understand what they're trying to express. This poem is called An Even Shape, and we will read the poem and we will answer items 21 to 30 based on what is stated or implied. And so many times we write, the poem is written and not everything is a giveaway. Based on how the writer chooses to express themselves, we can imply, we can understand, what the writer is trying to tell us. So let us read. It's called An Even Shape. Her garden looks in through my window, crisscrossed by the white lattice. Coolers they call them, but they're also hiding places for small girls playing. Her garden stands neatly round her house, travels politely onto the veranda to sit in pots or hang leafily down from large earth-colored urns. She lives with Mama, shepherding her with her full body. The hesitant ins and outs of Mama's half-blind days, feeding her frail consciousness with edited Gleaner news and homemade chicken soup. In her home, borrowed children touch her china birds with hands wiped clean from eating sticky cakes, each with a cherry on top, or press moist, breathless kisses round the corners of her smile. Sometimes she fills the space out with music, spreading out nostalgia through strings and flutes, old-fashioned love songs of blue moons and forever until. Shameful peeping Tom, I sit silent in my lattice, watching the even shape of her days, to catch just once a wider open door behind her steady eyes. But in her green-edged privacy, self-contained, she keeps the half-drawn shutters of her life open just so, and mocks my greed and restlessness with a calm refusal to be other than she seems. Okay, so this is the thing with poems. They don't always use the clear-cut words. They will try to be creative in their expression. So let us try to answer these questions. We're going to question 21. Now, the phrase, her garden looks, in line 1 is an example of, and of course we're looking for a literary device. Her garden looks in through my window. Now, a garden is not a living thing. They're giving the garden some kind of human feature to say that the garden is looking in through my window, and therefore the answer would be would be personification, definitely. 22, and that is D. 22, the garden seemed crisscrossed because, remember, they had said that it looks in through the window, crisscrossed by the white lattice. So why would it look crisscrossed? And that would be because the poet was looking at it through a lattice window. Number 23, which of the following phrases is meant to be taken literally? And when you take something literally, that you're taking it at face value, you're saying this is really what it means. So is it that the hiding places for small girls was actually a hiding place. The garden was a hiding place for small girls? Is it that the garden traveled onto the veranda? Is that literal? Was her frail consciousness being actually fed? Or are we saying that watching the even shape of her days was a literal thing? And if we're looking at literal, meaning this is what is actually meant, then we're gonna go with A. The garden was a literal hiding place for small children. They would go there and actually play hide and seek. 24. Her garden stands neatly round her house, and this is line 5. Now, are we taking this literally? I mean, the garden isn't standing literally, but to say that it is standing neatly around her house, what do you think that means? And we're gonna go with C. The garden which surrounded the house was well kept. It's neat. It's around her house. So yes, we're gonna go with C for 24. 25. The poet uses the words frail consciousness in line 14 to show that mama what? Well, we're looking at it and we're saying frail refers to being weak. Consciousness, when you're conscious, you know, you're in your right mind, you're thinking straight. So if we're saying that mama has frail consciousness, then it could be, the best answer would be B. She was not understanding as well as she used to. So yes, she was in her right mind, but you know, it's getting poor because maybe because of age, maybe because of sickness, but she wasn't as, you know, strong in her mind as she would have been. 26. Which of the following best describes the woman's extra thoughtfulness of her mother? And it actually asks for extra thoughtfulness. Now, she would have done some things that I guess would not be considered to be extra thoughtfulness. She would do it. She would feed her with the soup. But which one of these would show that she went above and beyond to take care of her mother? And the best answer here would be A. I actually really like C because it does take time to, you know, tell mama what's in the news. She would break down the news for mama. C is a very good answer as well, but we're going to say that the shepherding, and you know, when you have a shepherd protecting sheep, this is above and beyond. She lives with her mama, so it's not somebody else taking care of her, and she actually has that very protective quality. 26. Okay, so we're at number 27. The poet uses the phrase borrowed children, line 17. Of course, when you borrow something, it's obviously not yours. So these children were borrowed, they were not hers. So we can assume that she had no children of her own, and that the children who came, of course, would not have been hers. So we can safely assume that B is the safest answer here. Let's go up to 28. Which of the following were done by the children to show their love for the woman? The children showed that they loved the woman, and we have 3 options. Did they show their love because they wiped their hands before touching the china bird? Well, number 2, did they show their love because they ate all the sticky cake she made them? And number 3, kissing her on the side of her lips. Well, we're gonna say it's safe to say that they showed their love because they ate what she made for them and they kissed her on the side of their lips. The poem did say that they touched the china birds, you know, with hands that were wiped clean, not necessarily a show of love. We don't know if they wiped their hands or she wiped their hands for them, but we know that in terms of the children, they expressed their love definitely by kissing her and by eating and enjoying the cakes she made. So we're going to stick with C for 28. 29 and lines 23 to 26, we're making a suggestion about the woman. We have to go back, lines 23 to 26. talked about how she would use music to fill out the space, and she would get into a kind of nostalgic mood playing old-fashioned love songs. Wow, so what can we assume about her because of the type of music? And we have 4 options. Of course, they talked about the type of music. Now, our best bet is C. So yes, she loved to play music. We don't know, we cannot assume that the music was loud or it's about an orchestra, but we know that she really enjoyed listening to music, you know, happy music that talked about love. So C. 30, the word nostalgia, and we just looked at that. You know, to be in a nostalgic mood is to think of happy times of the past. And so the best answer for 30 would be D, right? So the music helped her to have happy thoughts of past events. Now we're at the second passage in the comprehension section of paper 1. And this would be the narrative. We just did the poem and now we're doing the narrative, which is a short story. And we are to read the passage and then answer the questions based on what is clearly stated, or of course with the creative use of knowledge, see what we can imply by what was said. Not everything will be clear cut, kind of like the poem was earlier. And I will read this for you now and we will go through the questions. Kino and Juana came to the place where the brush houses stopped and the city of stone and plaster began, the city of harsh outer walls and inner cool gardens where a little water played and the bougainvillea crusted the walls with purple and brick red and white. They heard from the secret gardens the singing of caged birds and heard the splash of cooling water on hot flagstones. The procession crossed the blinding plaza and passed in front of the church. It had grown now, and in the outskirts, the hurrying newcomers were being softly informed how the baby had been stung by a scorpion, how the mother and father were taking it to the doctor. And the newcomers, particularly the beggars from the front of the church, who were great experts in financial analysis, looked quickly at Juana's old blue skirt, saw the tears in her shawl, appraised the green ribbon on her braids, read the age of Kino's blanket and the 1,000 washings of his clothes, and set them down as poverty people, and went along to see what kind of drama might develop. The 4 beggars in front of the church knew everything in the town. They were students of the expressions of young women as they went into confession, and they saw them as they came out and read the nature of the sin. They knew every little scandal and some very big crimes. They slept at their posts in the shadow of the church so that no one crept in for consolation without their knowledge. And they knew the doctor. They knew his ignorance, his cruelty, his avarice, his appetites, his sins. They knew his clumsy abortions and the little brown pennies he gave sparingly for alms. They had seen his corpses go into the church. And since early mass was over and business was slow, they followed the procession, these endless searchers after perfect knowledge of their fellow men, to see what the fat, lazy doctor would do about an indigent baby with a scorpion bite. The scurrying procession came at last to the big gate in the wall of the doctor's house. They could hear the splashing of the water and the singing of caged birds and the sweep of the long brooms on the flagstones. And they could smell the frying of wood bacon from the doctor's house. Kino hesitated a moment. The doctor was not of his people. The doctor was of a race which for nearly 400 years had beaten and starved and robbed and despised Kino's race and frightened it too, so that the indigent came humbly to the door. And as always, when he came near to one of his race, Kino felt weak and afraid and angry at the same time. Rage and terror went together. He could kill the doctor more easily than he could talk to him, for all of the doctor's race spoke to all of Kino's race as though they were simple animals. And as Kino raised his right hand to the iron ring knocker in the gate, rage swelled in him, and the pounding music of the enemy beat in his ears, and his lips drew tight against his teeth, but with his left hand he reached to take off his hat. The iron ring pounded against the gate. Kino took off his hat and stood waiting. Coyotito moaned a little in Juana's arms, and she spoke softly to him. The procession crowded close, the better to see and hear. And this is an excerpt from The Pearl by John Steinbeck. Very nice in terms of use of language, in terms of creating, the imagery that we need to get in story writing. Okay, so question 31 is asking why was the word secret used to describe the garden? And our best option is A, because they were hidden from view. 32, the word procession, and we have seen procession, we've heard of processions. Now, what does that indicate about the crowd though? If we're going to refer to the crowd in terms of a procession, and yes, we would have heard processions when we're talking about a funeral, but we clearly know that it was not a funeral. So what was implied by the use of the word procession? And of course it was because they were moving as a group, they were orderly, and of course this all because they were following Kino and Juana to see what would happen. 33, which of the following statements is not true about the beggars? And I believe there was an entire paragraph dedicated to telling us about the beggars and how much they knew and where they slept. And so we need to find out what is not true. And of course, feel free to go back and look at the passage, but our best answer here would be C. They of course felt that the doctor was not a very good person, therefore it is safe to say they did not have a good relationship with the doctor at all. 34, in the passage, the expression great experts in financial analysis means that the beggars were what? Now, of course, they were beggars. This was actually a very good or funny take on, to describe the beggars. They weren't necessarily like trained, but it's really about how much they knew or how they could size you up based on how you look. And I thought that was really funny. So what would be the best answer here at 34? And it's A. They can definitely, and based on what we saw, they can definitely tell a lot about you because of how you look. Okay, 35. The description in paragraph 2, and this is, it would be lines 18 to 18. What does it convey to the reader? What kind of impression would you get as a reader as you read paragraph 2? And our best answer here is about harshness and poverty. Okay. 36. According to the passage, Kino hesitated a moment, and this was line 26, because of what? Why did he hesitate? Remember, he was, as we read further, we would find out that he had a lot of anger. He was thinking about the type of person the doctor was based on his race and how his race was treated by the race of the doctor. And so the best answer here would be that, he had a lot of emotions going on. He was angry and he felt a lot of hate. And so he had to, take a moment to calm down because he knew that he needed the doctor's help to save the baby. 36. in the passage, the sentence, this doctor was not of his people. Now, of course, in the reading, we would have realized that they were of different races, but, you know, and I thought about how D could be a good answer because they are from different backgrounds. In a sense, they're of different races, but the best answer here would be that, you know, for years, the treatment that the doctor's races showed to Kino's race was just very poor. And so our best answer here would just be A. There, the doctor did not really respect Kino's people. And so that's what line 26 would suggest. Number 38, which of the following is not illustrated in the passage? So we're looking for the three things that came out based on the reading, and to identify the one that really did not come out, or what was not said or implied. And if you look at the options, of course, it would show that there was no indication that the beggars were seen as kind people. They were very inquisitive. You know, they like to size people up and judge people based on how they look. And so, yeah, everything else was pretty much shown or implied by the passage. And so that was the narrative in the reading comprehension.